here, just my regular name, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Brockhampton album, Ginger. New record from the boy band of the internet era, Brockhampton. They are back, and it's been less than a year since the release of their last full-length album, Iridescence. A record that came out in the midst of a very tumultuous time in the band's career, following the exit of former member Amir Van. A sudden change that seemed to completely derail the group's release schedule. The album Puppy, that was said to be coming out soon, seemed to have been scrapped. This change also caused a deep, deep rift in the Brockhampton fan base that still seems to be going on to this day. Unfortunately, even though this thing was a pretty decent record with some quality material on it, it just didn't live up to the standards set by the fantastic Saturation trilogy. It wasn't very consistent or focused. Many of the bangers felt neutered or annoying or like they didn't go far enough. And the darker spots provided all of these meditations on the recent drama the band had been going through that I liked. I think marked a somewhat more mature direction for the band, but maybe that was something either fans weren't ready to hear or just wanted to move past. And given that reaction, I wonder if many fans will be messing with this new album too. Look, I enjoy this. I think it's good. But if you are going to appreciate what the group is doing on this record, there's some hard truths that you've got to face on this one. The boys are depressed. They are depressed. They are sad. They don't seem all too happy, and given all of the nods in the lyrics and the song titles, it's like they're finding God right now all of a sudden too. I think the average Brockhampton fan, or at least a casual one, is more looking for the group to just drop bangers, or at least move past this phase of their career where they're still dealing with this issue. But you have to appreciate that Iridescence wasn't so much a measured, thoughtful, or coherent reaction to the situation during May of last year. It was more of like, we need to like literally survive and struggle through this and still sound like we're together. This is like torpedo just hit the ship. It's not a surprise that Iridescence, as a result of that, came out as all over the place as it did. Ginger is more like a full and complete and a thoughtful exorcism of all of these negative emotions. It's essentially the finished idea of what some tracks on Iridescence merely provided a preview to. You could say that generally Ginger shares quite a bit in common with records from the Saturation series. It is consistent, it is focused, it is centered, it is emotionally potent. It just so happens that the material here is the band's most mature to date, and it's moving through a pretty dark place. So if you've gone into this thing expecting a new set of junkies and queers and gummies, you are going to be sorely disappointed. Ginger is a mood album. Look at the cover. It is going through something. This record is about internal conflict. It's about feeling lost. It's about being flawed. It is about redemption. It's an in-your-feelings type of album. Even the tracks that feature more of a groove, more of a beat, more aggression, have some supremely dark undertones running through them, like the eerie, plucky lead melodies in the beat of Boy Bye, or the funeral march horn lines on If You Pray Right. Ginger is a mellow album. It's a reflective album. It is a record that is a long, hard look in the mirror and noticing the bags under your eyes before you go have a 20-minute shower cry. So don't go into this thing with the wrong idea. It actually should be no question as to what you're getting into when you listen to the opening track to this thing, No Halo. The song has a gentle beat, subtly warped acoustic guitar arpeggios, bittersweet lead vocals that are kind of poppy in tone. I'm sure I'll find it. It's vaguely reminiscent of artists who in the past have had hits on the radio that have been similarly sad fusions of hip-hop and pop, Dido, Everlast, but nowhere near as corny. Actually, some compelling lyrics. Merlin and Joba specifically on this track, hitting upon some of the most key themes on the entire record. Religion as a way to cope with a situation, faith as a way to cope with a dark or a hard situation, as well as depression. The song Sugar is an honest-to-God, sad, slow R&B jam with more acoustic guitars, more beats, wild auto-tune vocal acrobatics with Don McLennan. The hook on this track would have crushed the charts if if it had been released decades ago, maybe by another trendier R&B group of that time. Meanwhile, the song Boy Bye is a very much needed pick-me-up in the first leg of the album. And even though it's one of the few tracks on this thing that you could call a banger, still those dark undertones are there. That plucky lead melody I talked about earlier, the spacey, weird piano samples that have kind of a Latin flavor, it's a mood. The track is one of the shorter and sweeter on the entire record, with stacked and impressive performances from Matt and Kevin and Dom. The song Heaven Belongs to You isn't so much a reprise, it's more of a teaser. It's one of the few tracks on here that features a guest vocalist, Slow Tie. Of all people, his last full-length record was incredibly impressive. Very happy to hear him here because he gives a great performance, good lyrics, good flow, also lyrically hitting upon some of the key themes of this album, especially the religious ones. The beat is a slight variation of the instrumental that comes up a track or so later on the song If You Pray Right. You could say this is another instance of Brockhampton throwing one of those weird, one-minute, one-off detour type tracks into the track list, but it's so much more than that because, again, lyrically it's fitting in with the themes of the rest of the record. Instrumentally, it links to another song on the album. It feels like it's a little slice of the overall concept of the record, and I like that. The track St. Percy is one of the more aggressive cuts here in tone, but it doesn't exactly bang because everything about the track is so minimalist and so simple. Much of the first leg is dominated just by this grimy, distorted bass line. Then later some ghostly R&B samples and some very, very, very real back bits of percussion creep in, but again, it's mostly that bass line that is dominating the track. Lyrically, the track does have a lot of attitude, but I am generally unimpressed by Kevin's very subdued performance in the first leg of the song. Also slightly weirded out by how cum-centric Matt Champion's bar seemed to be. Merlin's ballistic outro and Bareface's sassy bridge, as well as Dom's Bone Thugs inspired flows on the track are all welcome additions, though. The song If You Pray Right is another banger on the record. Really turns up the intensity, easily one of the most colorful instrumentals on the entire record, too. In some ways, I think the song could go toe-to-toe with some of the best bangers off of the few previous Brockhampton albums. It has a big bass-heavy beat, that Funeral March-inspired horn line that I talked about earlier, this drony little keyboard lick that sticks around in my ear, and some very sweet vocal refrains that are pretty catchy too. Meanwhile, Matt, Dom, Joba, Merlin all give some of their most animated performances on the entire record. But as vital as it is for Brockhampton to drop tracks like these, I think it's even more important that we hear Dearly Departed. This is basically a violent outward thrust of all of the negative emotions the group has been dealing with over the past year or so. It's all placed on top of this slow grooving instrumental that sounds a little vintage. It is like an anguished 70s soul ballad that is just drowning in water, drowning in atmosphere, some wah guitar in the mix too, vaguely psychedelic. And I love and could go on about every verse on this track and the significance to it, but the true stunner is the ending verse from Dom on the track, which is essentially his side of the story of the whole Amir Van situation. And it was said in a now deleted tweet that according to Dom, Amir had something to do with a friend of his being jumped when he went down to Texas, which was where most of Brockhampton's members were based when the group was first getting off the ground. So, again, it's essentially Dom's side of the story, him expressing his feelings of betrayal, extreme betrayal, and so much more in this incredibly explosive verse that finishes off with him screaming his brains out, slamming the door of the studio. It's a high emotion moment that completely exceeds, and then some, any previously sad or emotionally intense song in the Brockhampton catalog so far. The song I've Been Born Again I wasn't really blown away with as a first single, and within the context of the record, I'm still not super crazy about it. I think it's fine. It may sound a little bit better shoulder to shoulder with better tracks in a long track listing, yes, but I still feel like the track is a little ragtag, it's a little cobbled together, it's not short or direct enough to really impress based upon its sheer energy or aggression or attitude, and yet for a song that is 3 minutes and change, there's not a whole lot in terms of a coherent structure here. However, I do love the title track on this thing, though, for some pretty interesting reasons. It's this driving, danceable, and fantastically sad track. Reminds me quite a bit of the Postal Service for some reason. The vibes get even sadder on the track Big Boy, the first leg of which features all of these mutant-pitched, downtrodden, "You're a big boy now" vocals, a weird, strained auto-tune solo that is absolutely freakish. Joba's verse immediately after sounds like it's on the verge of an emotional breakdown, and actually features some of his most compelling rapping and writing in a while. Lost Cause and A Lost Child, Lost My Way Trying to Change for the Wrong Crowd. The second to last track, Love Me for Life, I thought had some potential to it, but it is a song that really did need to go back to the drawing board here. Didn't care for how understated Kevin's performance here was. Joba, I thought his melodic flow got very tedious, very fast. The closer, though, was a stunning ending, and it was named after the vocalist Victor Roberts. And he spits an absolutely sobering verse on this thing, and there seems to be a bit of vocal manipulation to his rapping. His voice sounds very unique, but a lot of the vocals on Brockhampton records are altered in some way. Still, his rapping is very frustrated, it's anguished. It's a very hard moment on the record to listen to, but then immediately after this we had this beautiful release of vocal harmonies that is absolutely gorgeous from Ryan Beatty, but also there is a beautiful passage with barefacing too. It's like one amazing angelic vocal passage after another, ending this incredibly sad album off on a very high and a very beautiful note. And that's the record. I loved it. I feel like this is the track that Brockhampton needs to be back on, and I feel like this is the confirmation that Iridescence was essentially a fluke of sorts. It was a record that had difficulties, that had flaws as a result of being released during a time that no group should be trying to rush out a record, and yet Brockhampton did it, and it just so panned out in a way where it was okay. You know, I think it's actually miraculous that during that time, Brockhampton as a group still released a pretty decent album. And I would argue Ginger is the bounce back from a very mild dip the group had last year. Now, all that being said, though, I think that there are a lot of Brockhampton fans that will not agree, merely because this record doesn't go hard. And as far as aggression is concerned, or bangers are concerned, yes, I do suppose that's true. But as far as those sad boy feels go and songwriting go, I do think this record does go quite hard. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this one. Transition, have you given this one a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe. Please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Brockhampton, Ginger, forever.